just going to go over how we use tiled and how we are going to use tiled to develop our game. It is part one of like a huge series that I'm going to have to make myself that just goes over all of these things. So right now I just have my VS Code tab open just because my code is here. This is sample project, obviously, as it says. And it's just going to hold all the code for the samples. But again, if you're using tiled, you don't need to be a programmer. I'm going to show you how to do it. It's very simple. So let's get right into it. So first thing you need to do is download tiled. I already have it downloaded, so I just have to open it up. It's right here. So you just open tiled like this. You know, it's a normal application. I have the previous one open here, but we're not really going to use that. So let's create a new map. It's going to look something like this when you first open it. So if you click here, just click new map. And so in this kind of window, it's going to show us how we're going to, like the format of the map, basically. That's what this top window is, and then the bottom is the size and the tile size. So I think we're going to keep our tile size universal at about 32 pixels. That's just the size of each tile individually. I think that allows us to fit in the most amount of detail per tile. And so the map size, it can either be infinite or fixed. Since we're making a roguelike and we have rooms, they're most probably going to be fixed. I think a good aspect ratio, or a good size, would be around 640 by 480, just on the standard. Of course, Pygame can scale this up using pixel manipulation. But the point is that 20 by 15 tiles should be a good enough size for now. So the tile render order is the order in which the tiles are rendered in the resulting file. So just keep this as write down, because that's what we'll be using as default in our programmer, so or in a file formatter. So just keep it as that. And in the tile layer format, these are just the formats that the tiles will be laid out in the output. So there's CSV, which is going to be like the whole tile outputted in commas. So for an example, I made this this little sample map, and so the sample map will show you, or it'll give you an example. So this is the tile number, and the CSV will just output all of them like separated by a comma in the whatever resulting file is. So you could keep CSV, but that's a lot of data, and I don't know for sure if you want to keep that amount of data, especially in what we're going to do. So I think it would be preferred if you just leave it as a zlib compression and the base 64. So base 64 is a standard compression ratio. It's just the way that your computer compresses stuff and saves data. And since we have a big game, we want to save as much data as possible. So I think leaving it as base 64 zlib compressed is the best option. Of course, that also means that it won't be very readable, like the CSV is over here, but that isn't much of an issue because the tiled has a nice UI. So once you finish all this up, you just have to click Save As, and it'll save your file. So we should put this wherever our project is, so I suggest just saving that wherever you need to. Of course, the Windows prompt will look different. So programming, and then from here you go to sample project, and then resources. You give it a name, we'll call it level 1. So level1.tmx is what the file will be saved as. Perfect. And so once you save it, it'll open up the window, which is the editor for the tiles. And we also need to open up a tile set. So a tile set is basically like, if you're in the art team, then you know what a tile set is. But a tile set is just like a ton of tiles compressed into one image, and they're split apart so that you don't have to keep multiple different images just to show the same thing. So we're going to make a new tile set based on an image. So once you click here on the new tile set button, it's going to prompt you to make a new one. We don't have to give it a name per se, but the important part is that it's based off a tile set. And so from here, I made a sample tile set. So if we go to Documents, Programming, Sample Project, Resources, and Rainbow Tile Set over here, that is exactly the tile set that we need. So the name will be Rainbow Tile Set based on an image. And we don't really have a transparent color, but normally there might be a transparent color if we buy one or if you get one through some different source. But we don't really have transparent color in this one. So we're just going to keep it as this. And now we say Save As. So now it's going to generate a new tile set, which is going to be .tsx, and it's already saved there, so we're just going to replace it with our current one. And as you can see, these grid lines kind of signify where the image is being cut. So there's going to be a red, orange, so Roy, GBiv, and then brown and black, because why not? So once we have these tile sets, it's going to be loaded in our level1.tmx here as well. Of course, we can load multiple ones. Once we start having multiple tile sets, we can start importing them in. And terrains is for something, it's for like wide-scale use, but we don't really care, so we'll just keep it as this. And so here we see the details of the map, which is just going to be the tile height, tile width, if it's infinite, blah, 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 compression level, the background color, and the whole ordeal with that. So we don't really have a background color. We're going to be using these tiles to form a background. So we're going to assume that this is a standard kind of grass world sort of thing. So we're going to rename our first tile layer. So these layers are kind of the layers that the tiles are set in. Of course, why did I have to repeat that? So we're going to add layers on top for walls and enemies and enemy spawns and such. So the base background, we're just going to call the background, of course. And here in the background, we're going to add one custom property. And this property is basically going to be... Actually, no, we'll add that property somewhere else. I'll change up the format. So since it's kind of a sort of fantasy adventure, we're just going to use green to fill out the entire thing. So we just dump green. Of course, we could just use the bucket tool, make life easier. And so boom. The entire background is basically green, and there are no special properties since it's just the background. We don't really have to specify anything. And so once we've created the background, we do need to start creating the walls. So I posted a sketch image, which I will also refer to on the Discord, and it'll also be linked somewhere in the video description for this. But that sample image is basically what this is going to be based off of. So since that sample image has walls and certain limitations, we do need to add a layer for walls. So we're going to call this layer walls, obviously. And so it's just going to be called walls. And make sure you put walls above background. Background should be the lowermost layer always. And so we're going to set walls to visible, and we're going to change our color. And so we don't want to bucket drop that. We just want to place them in. So we're just going to turn off the bucket. Oh my god, I cannot turn off. Okay, there we go. We're going to put them in one by one. And so our walls are going to be brown. I think brown is a good color for walls. That's kind of why I added it there. And so we have this side completely blocked off. Oh, crap. Oops. We have this side completely blocked off in the original one. So we're just going to fill it up like this and use the bucket tool to completely fill it in. And so this side was completely blocked out. And we had one entrance over here. So since it's the entry room, we don't want to keep anything too special in here. So we're just going to block off some of the corners, make it look nice and clean. It's not going to look clean though, because these are like very basic colors. And a tile set that I made in GIMP. So I'd take that how you will. And then we're going to block this part off since we only want the person to go either up or down basically. And we're going to fill this side in with walls as well, since we don't really want the user going backwards. And so once we've done that, we have two exits, so one exit over here, one exit over here. This one's obviously larger, this one's obviously smaller. Of course, we can make them the same size just by filling in this much, but that's too small, so we're just going to leave it like that. Maybe we can fill this little quadrant in over here. And so once we've done that, we need to, once we've made our walls, we need to make them walls in that sense. So you can, of course, preview what it would look like. So if I open up the background and I press H, it'll show me all the tiles inside of the background, which is all green, basically, and an overview of the other ones. If I press H on walls, it'll show me all the tiles that are walls, right? So once I know what tiles are walls, and once I've placed them, I need to add a property here. And so right here, there are going to be different values. I don't know if you've programmed before, but if you have so Boolean is basically a true or false value. A color is a color value, but we're not really going to use that. A float is a real number, so a number with a decimal. A file is obviously a file. We're not really going to use that either. An int is an integer, which is just a number that does not have decimal places. An object we're not going to use either, but it's a complicated tile object. So something like a reward we could tie to it, but we're not really going to use that either. And a string. So realistically, all we're going to use are booleans, floats, integers, and strings. So right here, we want to make a property that is a boolean, and we're going to call it collide. Or collides, like that, collides. And we're going to set this to true. And so what collides, what this value is basically when we make the game and when we process this map, a collides value is going to say if the player touches whatever this object is or whatever this wall is, then they cannot get through it. So it's going to be true so that they cannot get through whatever object it is. And of course, this can be changed inside the game. So if you gain some sort of a hammer that can break walls, we can turn this off, or we can add an attack that will turn that off. So that we can progress through the game. But for now, we're going to turn walls, and we're going to add the property of collides, and we're going to set it to true, so that when the player collides with it, they cannot get through. And so now, once we set the walls, we need to set the exits, which I guess is the second most important layer. So we're going to call these the exits. If you've seen the sample image, then you know where the exits are going to go, and we're going to make these exits black. So there's going to be one exit on top. And wait, I should rename this. We have to make a layer for each exit. So we're going to call this the top exit, spelled correctly, of course. And we're going to make one for the right exit, and that's going to be a layer. Of course, they can be on different layers, but they basically mean the same thing. So since we're on the right layer, if I press H, then we see that these are the only ones that really pop up. You can't really see it because everything else is black and the opacity is full. But the top exit is only that one, and the right exit has both. That's weird. I think I messed one thing up, so I'm going to delete these two layers. Don't mess things up. I guess that's my lesson. Okay, there. So now we only see these ones, and then we're going to make a layer for the top exit. And it's going to be these, and if we press H, oh, I guess it just shows up because of the opacity thing that I was talking about before. But yeah, so I guess that's all that matters. So we're going to go on right exit, and here in the properties window, we're going to add one property. This one's going to be a string property. So a string property is basically we're giving it some sort of text as the value. And so we're going to say goto, which is the name of the property. And then we're going to set this goto value to right. Since we're going to the right exit, we're going to set the goto to right. And so for the top one, we do basically the same thing. You add a property, set the name to goto, and it's also a string property. And then you click here and set it to top, since you're exiting through the top. Okay, and once we've done that, we want to add some interactables inside of the game, basically. Like, we don't want it to be just a blank walk around in a green world. So we're going to add one sign, which just says basically welcome. And so we're going to add a layer for the sign. So this is going to be a welcome sign. It's going to be a layer for the welcome sign. And so here we can, we're going to make our sign orange because why not? And so we're going to put the orange one right here. And if we press H, then we realize that the welcome sign, that's right, it's the only one. And so once we do that, we're going to add a property to the welcome sign layer. And it's also going to be a string. And this one we're going to call message, which is the message that's going to be on the sign. And so we're going to load that up. And we're going to set the message here. We're going to say like, what is it? We're going to say welcome to, whatever the game is, right? And that's going to be the message that's assigned to whatever there is. And we're going to also create one, and we're going to call it interactable. Interactable. And so interactable is going to be a Boolean value, of course, because we have the bool here. So it's basically, if it's interactable, that means the player can interact with it. Oh crap, I removed the property. Interactable. And so if the player can interact with it, that means they can press some sort of a button or whatever the active button key is and do something to it. And we're going to say, once we've set the interactable as well, we're going to say what type of interaction it is. So we're going to make another property called interaction, and it's going to be a dialogue. And we're going to set this to dialogue. And so it's basically going to give us a dialogue once we click this, and it's also interactable. And so we just need to make these three properties to make some sort of a sign in our game. And of course, the sign will have a proper tile set, not an orange block. You can have tile sets with a transparent background, as I mentioned before. And so you can put a sign on top of like a background tile, and it'll look really clean. But for now, we just have interactable, interaction, and dialogue, along with the message that it's going to display. And so once we've created a welcome sign, we're going to make the final layer for this kind of introduction scene, which we're going to call the player spawn. We're just going to call this, we're going to call this the player spawn. And so the player spawn tile kind of thing, it's not really going to be like a specific tile. You just copy whatever tile there is of the background, so it doesn't really make a visual difference. But we're gonna set this so that we know where the player is going to spawn. So let's say that we want the player to spawn in this tile, which is a 10-10. Wait, what? Okay, yeah. So it's the 10-10 one from over here, going from right to down. Because remember, that's the orientation it's set. And so once we put the tile over there, we press H, and this green tile is the only one there. Just to give like kind of an overview. And so once we have all of that, there's a visible. We can turn visible off. So if we want player spawn to be, let's say that we want player spawn to be red. We don't want it to look that clear. So we'll delete this one. Where is it? Remove layers. We'll delete this one. Let's make a better one, and we'll call this one player spawn because I mean we're not making a new one. We're just gonna call this one player spawn. And let's say that we want it to be red, just so that we have like a clear distinction of where the player is gonna spawn. And when we're designing the level, that's kind of important too. So we're going to make this also the 10/10th one right over here. But now if you look at the game map, there's an obvious red dot here. It's very weird. Unless we're like making a special player spawn thing, we don't really want that. And so to turn it off, we're going to turn visible off. So it's basically going to be invisible now. So the world can't see it, but it still exists. And so if we press H, then you can't see it. But if you turn it on, wait, no, I locked it. Turn it on, you can see it now. Okay, there. And in the player spawn, we want two things specifically, which are probably going to be the player X and the player Y. So we're going to set this to whatever tile number it is, so 10. And we're going to set the player Y to be whatever tile number that is, and that is obviously 10. And the reason we do this is, actually no, I don't even think we need to do this. I think we can just keep the tile, and the programmers can find the location of the tile, and it should do everything. So I don't even think these properties are important. You can actually remove them. So yeah, basically you just need to make one for player spawn. And if we had something like an enemy spawn, which I do over here, enemy spawn can be over or under, but the general hierarchy is spawns, objects, exits, walls, and then background. So collidables. And so let's make the last one, which we will call enemy spawn. And so enemy spawn is basically going to be a couple of cubes, and we're going to call these blue cubes. Maybe the player should have been blue and the enemy's red, but nobody cares. And so we're also going to turn this to non-visible, but for now we just want to see where we're going to place the enemies. So let's say we want one enemy over here and one enemy over here, just to annoy the player, like right before the exit, so they have to defeat the enemies before they get through the exit. So once these tiles have been placed, so this one is on the 16th and 8th, and this one is on the 12th and 4th, then we can just set it to be invisible. And so when it's invisible, you cannot really see it, but the tile still exists there. And so in the actual game program, we will load through and find all enemy spawn tiles and spawn one sort of an enemy there. And I guess one thing I should specify is the name could be a bit different. So let's say that we had one enemy called a slime. So we type slime and then underscore spawn. And this way, if we'll also rename this layer. How do I rename this layer? Oh, okay, right here. Name. So I'll set this one to player spawn, like this. And so the reason is in the game, we don't have to explicitly find anything. We could just say, oh yeah, for the enemy slime, we just spawn this one, and blah blah blah, and we continue on that way. And so slime spawn, player spawn, and everything we could just keep as that, and we summon each one automagically, based on what we need to do. So let's say that we also wanted to summon goblins, or one goblin right next to the sign, just to really grind in that damage. So then we just make a goblin spawn, and let's make this one purple just for the funsies, and we summon it right behind the sign. We can also make it non-visible, and now it's going to spawn a goblin in our world as well. So yeah, once we've done that, we've created our basic world so far, and so we just save the level, and we should be good. And so next, I will also open up a level 2, and this level 2 will be sort of in the format of a platformer. Of course, I'll go through like the specific foldering and everything when we actually get through the game, but for now that doesn't really matter. So let's open a new one. So file, new map, and orthogonal, zlib compressed, write down 20 by 15, of course as before, 32 by 32 tiles, so exactly as we want it. And we're going to call this one level 2 .tmx, or whatever file format we have. And so, of course, we have the background tile, so you can set this to background or whatever you want. And this is going to be like a basic platformer sort of thing. So we're going to fill in the background, and the background is going to be all blue, because, you know, it's a sky sort of blue. So yeah, just fill it all in with blue. Of course, it looks like the ocean now, but it's not my fault. I was very limited. I made this using GIMP, so do not complain. And next we're going to make our collidables. And the difference here is that the collidables can also be the ground here. So in the previous top-down, the collidables would be the walls, the primary collidables. But here the primary collidables would be the ground, because that's what the player steps on. And so we're going to make a layer called ground. And in this ground, we're going to fill it with some ground. Let's just fill it with some green. So we don't know where the player will spawn, so maybe we want to keep that first as well. I'm going to make one called player spawn. Remember, keep it like this. So player spawn with an underscore in between. And so player spawn would stay like this, and we just need to summon our player, which will be green, or red. And so let's say that we want the player to spawn in right over here. Then let's just keep this as visible, but we'll set it to non-visible by the end of it. And so once our player spawn has been set, we just need to set the ground value as well. And so for the ground tiles, we're going to make, let's say, one sort of a platform here, which will accompany the player, along with some ground on the bottom. Or maybe we don't need the ground on the bottom. And then let's say that we want them to jump down here, and then maybe we're going to have them jump over here. And there's going to be like a swift little drop down here, and sort of run down over here, and then this over here, and we'll have our final treasure right over here. Wow, so luxurious. So just sort of like a basic platformer. I mean, you could also do the shortcut and get through here and then go back up, maybe. I don't know. Depends on the jump height. But the point is that this is just a sort of platformer world. So we can expect that the player will move horizontally and only be like able to jump, possibly. And so once we've set the ground, we also need to set the obstacles on the bottom. What's stopping the player from hitting the bottom of the ground? Literally nothing. And so we're going to set another collidable layer, and we're going to call this the obstacle layer, or we're going to call it the lava layer. We want each one named. And so this lava layer, lava we're going to make orange, because that's kind of what lava's like. And so it's going to fill the entire bit of the bottom. And so if the player steps on the lava, we want the player to die. So if we look at the H level of each one, then we can obviously highlight what's happening on each one. And so for the ground, we want it to be collidable, so we're going to add property. So we're going to say collides, and we're going to make it a Boolean value, and we're going to set this to true. Okay, and so for the lava, we want it to be a collides as well, because it's also colliding with the player. The player will have to touch it at some point. So we're going to set this to a Boolean value, and we're going to set this to true. What we also want it to do is kill the player. So we're going to say, we're going to give it a property, and we're going to say obstacle. And so an obstacle is also going to be a Boolean. And so if something is an obstacle, that means it will actually hurt the player if the player collides with it. So we're going to have both the collides option and the obstacle option, so the game can properly parse exactly what the lava is supposed to be doing. And so once we set our player to spawn and we set our ground, lava, and everything to spawn, then I guess anything special here? Yeah, we had signs over here. So we want a little bit of a treasure. We want to put a treasure in this world. So we're going to make a spawn for this treasure, or we're just going to make a treasure location. And so we're going to make this a chest. And we can rename these to be good. It's just the spawn ones that are specific, because that's an automated system. And let's say that we want the chest to be brown, because chests are normally brown. So we're going to put this one right here, and if we do H, then that's the only block. And so we're going to give it a property. And so this property we're going to give it is probably going to be, it's going to be interactable, because the player needs to be able to click it, right? And so we're going to set this value to true. And if we recall here, if we go to here, we know that we need to specify the type of interaction and certain messages if we do have a message, or certain details. So we're going to make it interactable, and we're going to make the interaction a type of string. And so this interaction is going to be, we're going to call it the, I'm going to say that it is obtain. So an obtain interaction will, of course, give you an item. And so the message will be pre-generated. It's going to be like, you have obtained, or you have found, or blah, blah, blah. And so once we know that, we need to know what type of item we're going to be distributing. So we're going to say, we're going to give it a property, we're going to call it the item. And so the item that is giving, and let's say that this gives us the basic sword, or coin, let's just say it gives us gold. Like this chest will give us some gold. We just have to press enter. So now we know that this is going to be interactable, we know the type of interaction it's going to have, and we know what item it's going to return. So once we know these three things, we've basically set up our chest. So now that we've set up our chest, let's try to add one or two goblin enemies over here, or kobold enemies. Let's add kobold enemies. So we're going to do kobold spawn, and we're going to make these, I think we're going to make them purple, just for, the sake of easiness. So we're going to spawn one right here, so if the player goes down here, then they'll meet the kobold over here, and we're going to spawn one right here, just to annoy the player, like to the maximum level, and make it really difficult for them to get through the level, and have them fall down through here. And maybe we can have another chest over here that can also give them some gold, just to really instantiate that sort of challenge that they need to go through, just to get there. And so once we set that up over here, then we also want them to be able to exit back. The kobold spawn, we're going to make invisible, and the player spawn we're going to make invisible. And we also want them to go back. So we're going to add a tile layer, and we want to move this tile layer, but we'll just set it to the, left exit. And I think I'll also initiate sort of formatting here. We want it to be all in lowercase, and then the direction _ exit. So left exit like this, and we want it to be underspawn, obviously. And so here we're going to add a string property, and it's going to be called goTo, and this goes to the left room, so we're going to call it left. And obviously this is a black kind of thing, which goes in the left exit, and perfect. So now let's save this. So our platformer world is saved, and now our level 1 world is also saved. So let's just rename these top exit and right exit names. So we're going to call this top exit, and we're going to call this right exit. Okay, once we did that, we just click save. And so now if we load up over here, we see that in my file explorer we have these level 1s, and they're all kind of encrypted sort of world codes, and see it's like almost impossible to read, but it saves a lot more space compared to listing out every single possibility. This is the same size world and top down. So level 1, level 2, completely encrypted, nice looking, and the rainbow tileset and the rainbow tileset .x file will all be saved in this resources folder, which we'll be using to spawn our entire world. So I hope that was a good guide into how we make our levels, how we make our level designs, and then in the next one I'll be showing how we start making the game around these designs. And of course, as we go through, I'll be adding more to this documentation on how you make tiles, and I'll add more properties and stuff that depend on certain mechanics that happen inside of the game. But for now, I think this is a good enough thing to get you guys started on kind of planning out some levels and getting started with like what you think you're going to be doing. So I guess that's it for this certain video. Maybe I could explain one more thing if you guys would be interested. But that, of course, will wait for the next video, which I'll be recording right after this. So, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. Anyways, that's the end of the video.